Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the Will Smith apology video, which was released on July 29, 2022? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I will offer a brief background of this case, move to the summary of the apology video, then offer my analysis. On March 27, 2022, Chris Rock was presenting the Best Documentary Award at the 94th Academy Awards. After telling a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's lack of hair, her husband, Will Smith, walked onto the stage and slapped Chris Rock across the face. Chris Rock continued with his presenting duties. Later that evening, Will Smith won an Academy Award for his performance in the film King Richard. Now moving to the summary of the apology video. On July 29, 2022, Will Smith released a video featuring an apology for his actions at the Academy Awards. Here is a summary. Much of this is paraphrased. Will Smith's video starts out with text on the screen, which indicates he's been doing a lot of thinking and personal work. People have asked him a number of fair questions that he wanted to answer. The video starts with Will Smith sitting down and getting right to business. He reads the first question, which is, "Why didn't you apologize to Chris Rock in your acceptance speech?" Will Smith indicated that by that point he was all fuzzy. Will moves away from answering that question to talk about his efforts to reach out to Chris Rock. He said that Chris was not ready to talk, but would reach out to him when he was. Will Smith then spoke directly to Chris Rock, saying, "I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable. I'm here whenever you're ready to talk." Will Smith went on to apologize to Chris Rock's mother and other family members. He specifically mentioned Tony Rock, saying they had a great relationship, but he now recognizes the damage is probably irreparable. Will Smith said that he spent 3 months understanding the nuances and complexities of the slap. He didn't want to talk about that right now, except to say that there's no part of him that thinks his behavior represents the right way to act. It was not an optimal way to handle feelings of disrespect or being insulted. Will Smith moved to the next question. After Jada rolled her eyes, did she tell you to do something? Will Smith said that she did not. He made his own choice. He apologized to Jada and his children for the heat that he brought on them. Will Smith continued his apology by including his fellow nominees at the Academy Awards. He specifically mentioned Questlove and said, "I'm sorry really isn't sufficient." Will Smith then moved to his final question. What would you say to the people who looked up to you before the slap or people who expressed that you let them down? He answered by saying, "Disappointing people is my central trauma. It hurts him emotionally to know that he didn't live up to people's impression of him. He is trying to be remorseful without being ashamed of himself. He is human and made a mistake. He is trying not to think of himself as a piece of blank. He is aware that his behavior was confusing and shocking. He is devoted to putting light, love, and joy in the world." Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few items that stood out to me with the Will Smith apology video. Item number 1, Will Smith was very careful in his delivery, often speaking slowly and taking plenty of time between statements. On the plus side, his pronunciation was pretty good overall. Sometimes it pays to slow down. It's almost like he was trying to deliberately act in a way that was the opposite of how he acted at the Academy Awards. It could also be that talking about the slap brings back so many emotions that he must force himself to slow down in order to get through his monologue. Item number 2, Will Smith pivoted away from the question about his failure to apologize to Chris Rock during his acceptance speech. He blamed the failure on feeling fuzzy, but that really wasn't a great answer. I wonder if he dodged this question because he does not know why he acted the way he did. I find it interesting that he also failed to mention how he refused to leave the award ceremony after perpetrating the slap. This points to a sense of entitlement, which is separate from anger. Item number 3, I think that Will Smith's apology to Chris Rock and Chris's family members was direct and appropriate. He acknowledged his behavior was unacceptable. He recognized that the damage to relationships could be permanent, and he invited Chris Rock to contact him. I thought he handled this part of the apology pretty well. Item number 4, Will Smith said that he spent 3 months trying to understand his behavior. It's clear that he doesn't quite have a handle on it yet, but he acknowledged that he needs to respond better when he feels disrespected. So he may have partial insight. I think it would have been worth talking about this a little bit more, because in theory, Chris Rock's joke about Jada was the motive for Will Smith's attack. This was about Will Smith not being able to control his temper, no matter what the stakes. He wanted to satisfy his need for revenge, despite his behavior being broadcast to millions of people. It's hard to imagine him picking a worse time than he selected. I think it's good that Will Smith is trying to understand his behavior, but based on his mannerisms, he appears to be confused. I think it might have been a little too early for him to record a comprehensive apology. Item number 5. Many people have speculated that Jada directly or indirectly instructed Will Smith to attack, but Will Smith refuted that claim. It's interesting that he included this question in the video and that he specifically apologized to his wife. This reminds me of videos from the Vietnam War, when American prisoners were forced to condemn the war and to falsely confess to war crimes. Presumably, just off camera, there was a soldier holding an AK-47 in an effort to motivate the prisoner to offer the approved confession. For some reason, it's not hard to imagine Jada with a look of disapproval on her face standing just outside of the view of the camera during Will Smith's recording of his apology video. Now, of course, there's no way to know if this is true. She may have been sitting down. I don't know what type of acting jobs Will Smith can get at this point, but if he wants to play a prisoner of war, I think he is in the zone for that role. Item number 6, Will Smith apologized to other people at the Academy Awards and acknowledged destroying their special moment. He's already accepted his 10-year ban from the Academy Awards, so I guess he didn't feel motivated to expand on that point. Even still, I think it was a good idea for him to mention this. Attendees at the Academy Awards have certain expectations about how good or bad the ceremony will be for them. Will Smith was able to push the low-end expectation into a range that no one could have possibly imagined. On the plus side, he did make the evening memorable, although I don't think anyone is going to give him a slap on the back. Item number 7, Will Smith answered a question about how people looked up to him. He revealed something that could be critical about his motivations when he said that disappointing people is his central trauma. Being sensitive to how one is perceived isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem is choosing whose opinion will be considered important. Who was Will Smith trying not to disappoint? Many people believe that he goes out of his way to win the approval of his wife. When he attacked Chris Rock, he may have been trying to avoid suffering through Jada giving him a slap on the wrist. Item number 8, Will Smith's last point about not wanting to think of himself negatively is related to the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is when someone feels badly about something they did. Their bad act is externalized. It speaks to a mistake they made. Shame is when they feel like a bad person for making the mistake. Their bad act is internalized. It speaks to who they are as a person. Will Smith is open to experiencing guilt, but he wants to avoid experiencing shame. The problem is, that's not how emotions work. Shame is always painful, but it's not always negative in the long run. It probably makes more sense for Will Smith to fully experience the shame in an authentic way. This will allow him to better empathize with his victims. I wonder if Will Smith feels fully permitted to experience shame. If he is in a relationship where he is judged harshly, he may be reluctant to talk about his shame because those around him may pounce on that opportunity to amplify his shame, like the "I told you so" effect. People in highly judgmental situations cannot criticize themselves because it invites vicious scrutiny. If Will Smith felt supported, he would have a better chance of authentically exploring the shame. If he wants to put light, love, and joy in the world, he first needs to put some ownership into his life and separate the effect of any relationship dynamics. He needs to understand the source of the shame, what he contributes to it, and what other people may contribute to it. He also needs to figure out his expectations for himself as compared to what other people's expectations are for him. Moving to the last question, was this a good apology? Here are my thoughts on this. If one were to think of an apology as simply Will Smith saying that he is sorry, then his apology was excellent. If one were to frame an apology as a multi-step process to redemption, then we see some good and bad in his apology. I think Will Smith did a good job in a few areas. For example, taking time to self-reflect, showing genuine remorse, including many people in his apology, taking responsibility for his actions, acknowledging the damage he did, and to some degree, attempting to make some type of atonement. This is a little tricky because the circumstances of the slap were pretty unusual. It's not like he has all the same options for atonement that would be available to a perpetrator of a common offense. I guess Will Smith could start a victims fund for comedians who were slapped by actors, but I can't imagine that a lot of people would fall into this category. Like the victims would submit a claim to the fund only to receive a metaphorical slap in the face to go along with their literal one. As far as the areas where the apology was weak, I think there were two: insight and scope. Will Smith did not understand his behavior, and he did not address his refusal to leave the Academy Awards ceremony. Each apology has to be considered in light of the wisdom and insight that the person apologizing possesses. I think Will Smith is trying to understand himself and his relationships. With this in mind, I would characterize his apology as good-hearted, sincere, and thoughtful, but also as immature, lacking wisdom, and lacking perspicacity. Until a person has the discernment to explain their behavior, they will always be at risk for a repeat performance of wrongdoing. Those are my thoughts on the Will Smith apology. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.